Well, welcome back to Human Powered. I'm Jessica Becker, and I'm here with my co-host, Jen Rubin. And today we're talking to Katie Waddell, who's the managing director of the Center for 21st Century Studies. It's often referred to as C21. It's actually a center out of UW-Milwaukee for humanities research, collaboration, and public engagement. And they bring together communities of thinkers to address public issues, pressing issues of our time. They've actually been around since 1968, and they do a whole bunch of different things. I'm really excited to talk with Katie about this project she's been working on.
We heard about this project because they were awarded a Wisconsin Humanities grant, and it was for a series of community-situated workshops on what they were calling radical attention. And then Doge happened, and so there wasn't the funding, and Wisconsin Humanities had to sort of rescind the funding. But they were able to keep going with it, and they got some funding through the university. And we were just really curious to talk to Katie to learn more about what exactly was this. It sounds really interesting. So we're going to talk to her, and you guys will get to hear it.
Learn what radical attention is. Well, Katie, it is wonderful to meet you here this morning. And I think that, this is a conversation that we're really interested to learn more about what you're doing. And also, I'm really impressed by how you think about the humanities and the public humanities. Can you start maybe by just telling us kind of how you got to where you are and what drew you to this work?
Sure. Okay, so my administrative hero origin story goes back to 2010 when I enrolled in a dual art history and arts administration degree at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago to escape being in food service forever. And I had ambitions to become a contemporary art curator, but found that in addition to the field being super oversaturated, I also just wasn't as invested in the objects as I was in the people making them and viewing them and kind of convening around them. So I would end up going to the Art Institute and looking at the art, but also looking at all the people who were looking at the paintings and the sculptures and watching them to figure out if they were actually reading the wall text, what pieces were they stopping in front of. And then I also started going to I guess in Chicago, it's kind of common, or I don't know if it is now, but it was then pretty common for people to just have exhibitions in their apartments or to pool their money and rent a space. So I started by kind of going to all of those little underground exhibitions all over the city. And I went to see the art, but I also went to meet the people who were making it and to go to the after parties and to just kind of make friends and network. And eventually somebody invited me to an independent curators meeting. It was just an informal meeting that met once a month. It was just over brunch. And I got kind of enmeshed in that scene that way and started just on a whim, kind of started a festival that celebrated underground spaces exhibiting art in Chicago. And it started as very visual art centric, but over the course of the 6 or 7 years that I did it, the open call became interestingly kind of a home for a lot of oddball proposals that weren't always visual art, that weren't always performance, that were just this weird in between. And some of those proposals were actually kind of a little more humanities oriented in nature. One year we had a group called the Society of Smallness propose this kind of faux license, a faux government permitting bureau. And they all convened in a space and had a bunch of typewriters and would type up permits for people to have a good day or or to
Awesome.
marry their dog. And yeah, it kind of opened my eyes to not only what contemporary art could be, but what a humanities practice could entail, which is much more expansive, I think, than we tend to think about it or give it credit for.
Yeah, I mean, that leads me to want to ask you to talk about how you see the public humanities, because I think if I'm uh, just knowing a little bit about your background and your work at the Center for the 21st Century Studies in Milwaukee, you really think about the humanities in a way that I find very refreshing. And I've heard you say you can boil it down to one word. How do you think about the humanities and the public humanities?
Oh man, I don't remember what that word was.
Oh, that was great. That was awesome.
But
It was understanding.
oh, there it is. Okay, good. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're thinking critical thinking just now. But yeah, I mean, I think like depth and understanding and critical thinking and kind of applying that broadly and not taking anything for granted, I think is like at the heart of like what humanities and critical theory is and does.
So I'm really interested in hearing you talk about sort of the big project, you've been doing around sort of radical attention.
Mhm.
And I actually just, I was reading through a description in that you have these community story fellows, and one of them is Adam Carr. And
Mhm.
I actually just got back from spending 6 days with Adam Carr in an Airbnb with Rob Chang from Hawaii because we were in Maine, spending the week inside Maine prisons, doing humanities work inside Maine prisons. So I spent a week with Adam, and we spent a day walking on the beach, and he was explaining this project to me, and I realized it was a project. It was a community fellows project. So maybe if you could first tell us, like, what are these community story fellows? How'd that come to be?
Okay, so Story Cart is a mobile story collection project that kind of like wanders around Milwaukee and collects stories from Milwaukeeans about their lived experience, usually around a theme. And you could kind of think of it as something similar to StoryCorps. Yeah, people just go out and they interview people kind of around certain central questions. It was a project that was started by one of our predecessors at C21, the Center for 21st Century Studies, Ann Basting, who was the former director, who really kind of pushed the center in a more kind of public humanities direction. And so we inherited it, and the format as it was basically kind of as described. They had graduate students go out with an actual physical heavy cart that was kind of like if you imagine like an ice cream cart, but like wooden and kind of a beautifully designed art object. They would go around the city and kind of rapid fire ask people questions about like voting or food access, and then collect those stories. And we're still kind of building the repository, the digital archive that they're going to be housed in. Um, when I became managing director of the center, it kind of happened at the same time as the ascent of Jennifer Johung, the current director, into her role. And we both have arts backgrounds. And we started talking about how we liked the project, but we would be interested to see what would happen to it if the interviews were less like rapid fire interviews and more like conversations. Um, we talked a lot about how to like make that happen. So we came up with the idea to, instead of have graduate students be the main interviewers, pick like three different Milwaukeeans who have some kind of conversation-based or like dialogue-based practice that they already do. Um, to facilitate some of those, to not only facilitate some of those conversations, but author the exchange. Last year, our kind of research theme at the center was slow knowing, which of course is very abstract. And that theme was like kind of like the first theme as I kind of like actually as I was interviewing, the center was gearing up to do that theme, and they, as a part of my like job interview process, they asked me to give a presentation on the kinds of programming that I would implement around slow knowing. And in kind of the course of researching that, I stumbled upon this group called the Strother School of Radical Attention,
Mm.
and they're a Brooklyn-based kind of cohort of artists and scholars and thinkers and like different kinds of practitioners who over the past few years have kind of like rapidly ascended to this kind of like still niche, but like nationwide recognized nonprofit. And they do work around what they call radical attention, which is basically calling attention to like the challenge of what they call attention fracking. So uh, like taking attention from people as a resource by like different kind of like media companies and corporations and politicians. Um, and they one of their core programs is this thing that they call attention labs, where they have people do like meet in groups of about 30 or fewer, and they take them through these kind of attention experiments that are very simple. Like one that I've experienced is like involves like looking at your hand and then feeling your hand with your eyes closed, and then like looking at somebody else's hand while you kind of feel through proprioception like your own hand. Just different ways of kind of orienting like your focus.
And into the body. I love
Yes,
that.
and into the body. So some things are very body centered, some things are very vision centered. So originally when we had applied for a grant from Wisconsin Humanities, it was to bring them to Milwaukee to do a few of these detention labs. And the grant was rescinded, as we know. But we decided to just make a special appeal to our school to get the funding to bring them anyway, and it worked. And so we brought them in May of 2025, I believe. Had a great day of workshops. It was like full house. People lingered for the entire day, which we didn't expect. We had amazing conversations. And so we were like, okay, like we think that this is like the basis of some really rich programming. So we decided to like take their kind of borrow their model while crediting them with their permission, and have our story fellows kind of model their basically like write their own attention lab exercises to try out all over Milwaukee. So that's kind of like the long version. Um, and
So when you
so
say all over Milwaukee, like they're getting off campus, they're leaving UWM and
yeah,
doing this work in the community.
yes.
How does UWM see that as useful to like back to the organization or back to the institution? I mean, that's the big question of the public humanities, right? Like what's the impact? What's the point?
Oh man, I mean, that's a great question. Um, I mean, no one has kind of like ever, nobody from the school has ever really articulated like to me, like why they think it's important. But I know that every time we kind of like raised this project to the assistant dean, to the dean, they were like verbally very supportive and we're really excited about the work that was being done. I think kind of more broadly speaking, the general public, at least in the United States, has kind of lost sight of like what's valuable about the humanities. Even though actually, if you think about it, we're immersed in like the humanities all the time, right? Like there are blogs devoted to like discussions of films. Like if you go on YouTube right now, you could find a million different like series, of people who actually often who have like film degrees and film backgrounds breaking down popular shows. And it's something that's around us all the time, but like nobody really talks about it as humanities anymore. And for me, I think I'm very, very kind of like centered in public art, public humanities work. For me, I see it as necessary because it's just a way of calling attention to something that is like very, very important for the fabric of our society, of our culture, that is kind of like taken for granted.
Hmm.
Yeah, I would say I was sort of thinking about the same thing. Like, it makes sense to me that people at the university, like, they're like on the front line seeing,
Yeah.
well, what happens when people don't know how to pay attention?
Yeah.
Like, what can happen educationally? What can happen?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's sort of a disaster, and I think it's been a slow moving disaster that's picked up a lot of speed.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense to me. They're seeing it. Every friend I know who teaches in a high school or teaches on a college campus, like they're seeing it, they're dealing with it. So, an outside humanities group coming in saying like we have some creative ideas to try and get some conversations going on a campus, I would imagine would be welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. And this past, I think it was in March, or no, maybe it was in April, we hosted one of the Cactus book clubs. And just, if you're not familiar, the Cactus Club or Cactus Plus is a bar turned nonprofit in Bayview that host like monthly book clubs that are led by community members. And community member gets to pick the book. We picked Attensity, which is the kind of attention activism manifesto that this same group of people, the Strother School for Radical Attention, some of their members authored. And much to kind of like my surprise, because it's like a manifesto, it seems like an obscure subject. When I showed up at the book club the evening of, like it was a full house. The whole room, like people had to get more chairs, and like the conversation was very deep, and everyone was very engaged. And some of the people in the room like weren't actually most of them weren't affiliated with UWM at all. Some of them had just seen like the poster for the book club in like a public library and showed up based on how taken they were with the concept of attention activism. So I think it's something that people kind of like and feel intuitively, even if they don't kind of like understand like like the mechanisms of like attention fracking. Also, some of the folks at the Strother School really frame it as like an existential crisis in a way, because like here's a question I pose to people. What is attention? And I'm gonna have you answer it actually. What is attention? Where does it take place?
Well, I think it's a really good question, and I love thinking about it because the first reaction that I have is, it's kind of coming through the senses, right? It's like the eyes, the ears, but then in bringing it in through those senses, and the obvious sort of place that attention sits is in the body,
Right.
right? That it's this sort of feeling. Um, and because I guess the body's so large and there's five senses, it's also easy to lose when other things come into those senses, right? Yeah, that's a great question.
So attention comes in through the body and it occurs in the mind. And what is the body and the mind? It's you. Your attention is you. So if like your attention is kind of being directed and stolen, if you will, by like different people who want to profit from it, then like you essentially are being directed and stolen by different people who profit from your life and your mind and your existence in a way.
Yeah.
So I really think it's that deep. And that's why attention is like in crisis, if you will. Also,
Yeah.
I love how interesting the phrase pay attention is. Like it's something very limited that you give away.
Right.
Mm, mm.
Well, I
Oh,
really,
that's
I
deep.
really, I really appreciate the language you use about attention fracking because I've been talking about it. I've been thinking just for other reasons. I've been thinking a lot about like how wealth is extracted, and like where the wealth ends up. And so to think about this, like, yeah, my attention is a wealth, like that's my wealth, and
Yeah.
it's being extracted. So I like that language. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant, and I haven't heard these terms before. The attention fracking. I'm gonna be sitting with that for a while. I love it. Can I read something you wrote, Katie, back to you for I really appreciate this. Like I said before, Wisconsin Humanities is in big national conversations with others, state humanities offices and councils and part of the National Endowment for the Humanities. So the word humanities is discussed all the time. I worked there for 25 years. So I want to read something you wrote back to you about what the public humanities is. It's work generally about getting people to engage with the world around them in a way that isn't merely transactional, in a way that can't be reduced to just consumption or production, but is instead about their role as a citizen, a neighbor, a thinker, a dreamer. I mean, I guess that's sort of what you're ultimately pointing to is that it's who we are, and if we're not talking about attention in the conversation, then we're missing something important. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot about how I forgot that I wrote that.
It's
Um,
smart. It's good.
well, actually, it's something I think about like all the time, pretty much on the daily. Like, I don't know, I just looking back to when I kind of like started my humanities journey back in undergrad. I was like a double major in English and studio art because I couldn't pick one. They were just too juicy. Um, over the course of like this past, the past 2 decades, just I think about how much the logic of the market, if you will, capitalism or advertising to how much they've kind of like permeated everything. To such an extent that it's no longer taken for granted that like you would do something that's immoral or unkind or, risky to justify a business decision. And like that's kind of like always existed, but it's just become more commonplace for people to see the world in those terms. Um, and, I think the humanities are meant to offer a different framework for seeing yourself. So we at C21, we do 3-year theme cycles where there's like a big banner theme and then there are sub themes, which I think is really nice because themes kind of like narrow down the scope of like what you're doing, but like a theme cycle allows you to continue the work if something is working. So when I came into my role, it was year one of 3 years of slow. That was like the banner theme. And slow is just like if you think about the slow food movement and apply that logic to like basically anything else. Year one was slow knowing, which very abstract, but like that's kind of where the attention work started because of course, like thinking about attention in like non-monetizable terms, like you get to like meditation and reading and fulfillment and being in the moment and all these different things that kind of like edify people and build them up as humans. Slow care was already in place, but we decided to keep it because it was just such a beautiful transition from like slow knowing is very kind of like thinking about the self. And slow care is just kind of like projecting that out onto partnerships or communities and other people and how we think about our relationships with like each other. And next year is going to be slow action. Over the course of the past 2 years, we decided to pivot from slow democracy to slow action because we felt it like we just democracy feels very abstract, and I think a lot of people feel betrayed by the concept of democracy right now.
Yeah.
But slow action is something that means that we can pivot to from thinking about like a political system to just like collective organizing, community organizing, the things that people can do right now. Um, and to also think about like not just the things that people can do right now, but how kind of like small, persistent actions can like build up to something bigger. And, in a very results-oriented society, I think it's very tempting to only want to participate in something that will give you like a return on your time investment. But that's not necessarily how big kind of like lasting movements work. But if you think about some of like the forces that have like really entered the political arena that weren't there 20, 30, 40 years ago, or like weren't very visible, and have really like influenced the way our various like seats of power like operate now, and have really infiltrated that space. That's a project that has been going on since before I was born. That's a project that has been worked on by hundreds of thousands of people through hundreds of thousands of different institutions. That is, in a way, a collective project. And interestingly, I think a lot of the people who are trying to tear down the humanities within the university, or at least change it, are people who actually understand the value of the humanities.
Yeah. Katie, I've really enjoyed having a chance to listen to you talk and think about your work. And, one of the reasons Jessica and I are interested in talking with you and all of the folks we've been interviewing is we really want our listeners to hear from people who are deeply engaged in their community, using the tools of the humanities in some way to like for civic health in their communities. There's so many people doing such impactful work that we can all learn from and try to build on. And so with that in mind, is there any, kind of last thoughts you want to leave us with?
Yeah, so I just came back from a CHCI conference, the Consortium of Humanities Centers and Institutes. And there was one speaker who I found particularly moving, actually, who spoke a lot kind of off the cuff about like the importance of the work that we do, and not in kind of like, we're important kind of way, but like actually like this is meaningful work that makes an impact. So one of the things he said is that all humanities work is irrevocably social, which makes sense because like the root word of humanities is humans. That's why public humanities is so important to me, because I think it's the humanities is human. It's like one of the reasons why I love art so much is because I feel like art, music, novels, anything humanities related is like our best selves writing love letters to other people.
Mm.
And in that way, I think all humanities work is irrevocably social. And something that I would like to impart to your listeners is to not take that for granted. Don't take for granted how important humanities work is. Don't take for granted how much small actions lead to really big impacts. And don't take for granted how much the grinding work of getting up every day and sending emails, or I don't know, setting up chairs, or any of the kind of like work that feels small, like don't take for granted how much it's actually a part of a very big kind of weaving of efforts that amount to something very profound and global.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
an amount to our existence as humans.
Right,
Yeah.
correct,
That
correct.
goes back through time and will go into the future. So
Yeah,
that's a lovely
literally,
reminder.
right.
Yeah, yeah, especially we're talking here in the morning, and thanks for setting the tone for my work day as as we leave the conversation and I go off to send a lot of emails and put the office together and all
Yeah,
the things.
metaphorically set up chairs and yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Thank you. Thank you
Well,
very much.
I feel like back when humans were first acquiring language, like there's probably somebody in a cave who was like, "Oh, I have to move all these rocks around."
Yeah.
Our ceremony.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Well, I really enjoyed hearing Katie talk about the work they're doing, how she thinks about the humanities work. You know, you could probably hear it in the interview, but we both were really liked that term attention fracking. I will say for me personally, um, it was really interesting to be in a conversation about paying attention when I was very distracted because we have a pest control manager in my house as we speak, trying to help us deal with our our varmint issue or whatever. So it was a good meditative exercise for me to keep attention going. But yeah, I just feel like I learned a lot from her, and I'm going to look up these organizations she talked about to learn more about the work.
Yeah, and that book especially I'm interested in. Yeah, we're so lucky to get to have these conversations, and I do find that they draw me in, and I appreciate that the different people we talk to have different perspectives on why the humanities matter. And she was really lit up about the importance of the humanities, and actually, to me, it's kind of a radical notion to acknowledge that attention is the core of who we are, and that in that way, it's really inseparable from the humanities, and then to put that into the public context, I just found it fascinating. So thanks you all for listening. We'll put some links in the show notes, and thanks to Christy Widmeyer, who is doing audio editing, and thanks to Wisconsin Humanities for keeping these conversations going.